In the early 4th century, the Roman Empire was breaking apart, torn by civil wars, economic collapse, and religious violence. From this chaos emerged one man, Constantine, a ruthless general who claimed that God himself had chosen him to rule. After a vision before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, he marched under a Christian symbol, crushed his rival Maxentius, and began dismantling the old pagan order that had ruled Rome for 1,000 years. He granted tolerance to Christians, poured imperial gold into their churches, and moved the center of power east to a new capital that would bear his name, Constantinople. To many, he was a visionary who saved the empire and changed the course of world religion. But his reign was also soaked in fear and blood. Savage laws, public executions, and the mysterious deaths of his own son, Crispus, and his wife, Fausta, ordered by the same emperor who now ruled under the sign of the cross. Genius reformer or unstable tyrant. Holy emperor or brutal opportunist. The truth about Constantine is far darker and far more complicated than the legend. Constantine's story does not begin in Rome, but on the empire's rough Balkan frontier. He was born in the city of Naissus in the province of Moesia Superior, today's Niš in Serbia, sometime between 272 and 285 AD. His father, Flavius Constantius, later nicknamed Constantius Chlorus, was a career soldier from the Danubian provinces who rose through the ranks to become one of the most capable generals of his generation. His mother, Helena, came from much humbler origins, described by later writers as the daughter of an innkeeper, a woman of low social status who almost certainly was never formally married to Constantius. From birth, Constantine lived between two worlds, the hard military elite that ruled the late empire and the everyday provincial life of his mother's class. In 293 AD, the Emperor Diocletian created a new system of rule known as the Tetrarchy, dividing the empire between two senior emperors called Augusti and two junior emperors called Caesars. Constantius Chlorus was chosen as Caesar in the west under the Augustus Maximian, while Diocletian himself ruled the east, backed by his Caesar, Galerius. To cement these political alliances, Constantius put aside Helena and married Theodora, Maximian's stepdaughter, leaving Constantine as the illegitimate son of a man whose career depended on loyalty to his imperial partners. As part of this political reshuffling, the teenage Constantine was effectively taken as a high-status hostage and brought to Diocletian's court at Nicomedia in the east. There, far from his father and homeland, he was educated at the center of imperial power, observing up close how emperors commanded armies, crushed rivals, and used religion as a tool to control the restless population. Constantine spent more than a decade moving within the upper circles of the Eastern Court, serving under Diocletian and later under Galerius as a staff officer and field commander. The sources say little about his formal education, and later historians have argued bitterly about how intelligent he really was. But what is clear is that he learned the one skill that mattered most in the late Roman Empire: how to survive and rise in a system where emperors could be made and murdered by their soldiers in the same week. He fought in campaigns along the Danube and in the east, gaining real combat experience while watching older emperors try and fail to keep the empire stable through rigid bureaucracy and ruthless repression. Diocletian's Tetrarchy temporarily halted the chaos of the 3rd century, but it also created a time bomb. 4 emperors meant 4 courts, 4 armies, and eventually 4 ambitions that could not coexist. In 305, Diocletian and Maximian did something no Roman emperors had ever done voluntarily. They both abdicated, stepping down in a carefully planned transfer of power to the junior Caesars. Constantius Chlorus became Augustus in the west, ruling Gaul and Britain, while Galerius became Augustus in the east. Constantine, now a proven officer in his 30s, should have moved smoothly into a position of power alongside his father. But Galerius hesitated. He knew that if Constantine reached the west and joined his father's army, the troops might proclaim him emperor, whether the tetrarchic rules allowed it or not. For months, Galerius delayed, but eventually he had no choice. Constantine was allowed to depart, but according to later accounts, he was forced to ride hard across the empire, allegedly injuring or killing imperial post horses along the way so no one could chase him down and drag him back. Constantine reached Britain in 306, where Constantius was preparing a campaign against the Picts in the north. Father and son only had a brief reunion. Within months, Constantius fell ill and died at Eboracum, modern York, on July 25, 206 AD. The moment he died, the soldiers did what Galerius had feared. They ignored the tetrarchic rules, lifted Constantine on their shields, and proclaimed him Augustus, Emperor of the West. Technically, this made Constantine a usurper, a man whose claim to power rested not on legal succession, but on the raw loyalty of the soldiers who followed him. Galerius reluctantly accepted the situation, but tried to cut Constantine down to size, recognizing him only as a junior Caesar and granting the senior Western rank of Augustus to his own ally, Severus. From that moment on, Constantine understood exactly where real power lay, not in legal titles granted from the imperial court, but in the swords of soldiers willing to kill and die under his command. Over the next 6 years, the empire slid toward open civil war as multiple men claimed the imperial title: Constantine in Gaul and Britain, Maxentius in Rome and Italy, Licinius in the Balkans, and various short-lived rivals backed by the ghost of Diocletian's tetrarchy. Constantine proved himself not just lucky, but strategically brilliant. He fortified his position in Gaul, maintained the loyalty of his frontier legions, and carefully avoided reckless confrontations while his enemies burned their strength fighting each other. He presented himself to the populations under his rule as a strong but fair leader, lowering some taxes, protecting provincial elites, and associating his image with the unconquered sun god Sol Invictus, a popular deity that symbolized victory, light, and imperial power. He was not yet a Christian emperor, but he was already experimenting with the power of religious symbols and propaganda to strengthen his rule. By 312 AD, the situation reached breaking point. Maxentius, who controlled Rome and Italy, had become deeply unpopular with the Senate and people of Rome, accused of financial mismanagement and ruling through fear. Constantine saw his chance. In the spring of that year, he led a relatively small but highly mobile army across the Alps, smashed Maxentius's forces in Turin and Verona, and marched steadily down the Italian peninsula towards Rome. At every battle, he personally led from the front, using rapid marches, surprise attacks, and careful use of terrain to overcome larger forces. His officers watched a commander who combined cold calculation with reckless personal bravery, a man who seemed to believe that destiny itself would not allow him to fall. The final confrontation would come at the Milvian Bridge, just outside Rome, where two imperial claimants and two visions of Rome's future were about to collide. On the eve of the decisive battle for Rome in October 312 AD, Constantine faced a terrifying reality. His army was smaller than Maxentius's forces. He was deep in enemy territory, and the future of the entire Western Empire hung on what happened at a single bridge over the Tiber River. Ancient Christian writers claim that at this moment, desperate for an edge, Constantine turned not to the old Roman gods, but to a new and dangerous deity, the god of the persecuted Christians. According to Lactantius and Eusebius, Constantine either saw a vision in the sky or received a dream in the night, a strange symbol and a message. The sign was either a cross or the Chi Rho, the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek, and the words that appeared with it were simple and chilling. In this sign, conquer. What happened next is one of the most debated moments in all of Roman history. Before the battle, Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint this Christian sign on their shields and to carry a new standard into combat, the labarum, a military banner topped with the Chi Rho.
At dawn on October 28, 312, Constantine advanced toward the Milvian Bridge. Maxentius, confident and eager to keep the fight away from the city walls, had left Rome and drawn up his forces on the far side of the Tiber, relying on a temporary pontoon bridge to control the crossing. The battle that followed was brutal and chaotic. Constantine's troops, hardened frontier soldiers loyal to their commander, attacked with ferocity, driving Maxentius's forces back toward the river.